I'm going to agree with a lot of what some of the speakers have already said and very strongly disagree with some of it, which I think will give us some interesting points for discussion. But I'm going to start with what the houses or apartments or the structures that our grandchildren are living in, what they'll be, how they'll think about them. And I hope, I believe, I think we must have a situation where they think of them as homes, not as financial instruments, which is how we've got to which is the situation that we're in, very much in now. And that's where I'm going to come to the first point of disagreeing with Corinne, I'm afraid, because I don't think any of our grandchildren will be working in the financial sector in the way she's talking about, because we'll have a world in which the financial sector is far smaller and is not presenting the kind of risk of crushing the global economy that it does now. And that sort of brings me to the next kind of world that the grandchildren will be living in. It will be a much more equal world, because of course when we're looking forward to our grandchildren, we're also very much saying what's wrong with what we've got now. And one of the facts which I would really love to get some more traction is the fact there are now more bedrooms per person in Britain than there has ever been before. Now, there are issues around the fact of we have smaller households, people living longer, marriages breaking up, etc. But that's also a reflection of the fact that we have a deeply and increasingly unequal society. So the part of London, I live in Camden in North London, central London, and I live in Somers Town, which is a very crowded community where there are quite a lot of, I talk to mums at the school gate and regularly find families where there are 3 children and 2 adults living in a 1-bedroom flat or a 2-bedroom flat if they're lucky. And yet just north up the road in Hampstead, the really big local government issue is the fact that people are worried about their house prices because their neighbours are digging out double basements, because you can't really live without the home cinema and the home gym and maybe a swimming pool as well. And that inequality is, you know, if you start to tackle that inequality, I would say that some of the issues around readjusting the right number of people in the right number of houses, that starts to address the issues of our shortage of housing. And then we get to the regional issue, and I'm afraid this is where I'm going to rather spectacularly disagree with Corinne again, because I do not believe that HS2 will be built or should be built. And the reason, one of the main reasons I would say that is it will be, I believe, astonishingly bad for the North and the Midlands. It will mean even greater focus, even bigger focus of people, resources and money on London. And that's the last thing England needs, it's the last thing the North and the Midlands need, and it's absolutely the last thing that London needs. So what we need, the homes that our grandchildren are living in, whether it's here in Leeds or elsewhere around the country, is those homes need to be centred on strong local economies. There need to be good jobs, local businesses, small businesses, cooperatives, all working together and trading together. Not a business based on big multinational companies, the kind of big multinational companies that we have now that are paying our minimum wage to a large number of their workers, that are paying 0 hours contracts, that are putting their profits into offshore tax havens. But homes built in the centre of communities with small businesses, cooperatives, trading going round and round in those communities. And part of that will certainly be, and this is why I'm very much not I'm certainly not in favour of suburban extension, and I'm very much have doubts about garden cities, because those homes of those the grandchildren are living in will be quite near the places where lots of their food is grown to feed them. What we will have is our existing cities, our existing towns and villages, with the restoration of the rings of market gardens and the orchards that used to be around them. A lot of those have now been turned into housing estates, of course, but we've still got the next edge bit, which is a bit with the golf courses, sorry golfers, apologies, golf courses becoming market gardens, some of the pony fields becoming market gardens. So our grandchildren will be living in an environment where they can expect quite a lot of the food on their plate has come from just down the road. And that, of course, is providing lots of job opportunities, lots of business opportunities for our grandchildren. And coming back a bit to the financial side of it, the unequal society, I would say, I mean, I very much hope and believe that we'll see much more building of council houses, cooperatives, communally owned homes. But we're still going to probably almost certainly have lots of privately owned homes. And they will, if they're living in a privately owned home, the rent will be tightly controlled. The landlord will have to meet very high standards of housing quality, you know, fixing the boiler when it goes wrong, and they'll have a real security of tenure that means that private rental home is truly their home. On the kind of continental European model, whatever you want to live there, that's basically your home, with a quite solid degree of certainty and security. And what we've really got to do is think about, we really can't separate the homes and the economy. And I think, you know, I'd agree that the issue of, we've got a lot of this retail space, which is soon going to be, you know, very much not in demand for retail. And what we mustn't be doing is, as we see all too often in London, and it happens around me on a sort of regular basis, there's another pub gone, turned into luxury flats. We have to keep our retail spaces, our commercial spaces, our centres of entertainment, and use them in creative kind of ways, whether that's community ways or whether that's production kind of ways. Let's turn lots of small retail centres into centres of production. And this is where we go to things like the old 3D printers. And I'm still waiting to get my new phone cover from the local 3D printer because I haven't got green yet. But I'm looking forward to the point when that comes along, because I can get that local production from just down the road in an old commercial area in the centre of London. So that's, again, we've got the strong local economies built around new technology. And we've got, I'm wearing a little badge which I'm sure you almost won't be able to read, but it's the Branley Baths, which I visited today here in Leeds. A wonderful community facility. We'll be preserving the quality of our community facilities, often through communal ownership models, cooperative models, because what we cannot afford to do is see situations where those kind of things get privatised, get sold off. We need those facilities around where people live. You know, Jonathan Essex, a Green councillor in Surrey, talks about, and I'm sure you're all familiar with this idea, the 15-minute community. Your home, your work, your leisure are all within a 15-minute walk or cycle. And that's where we need to go. And I guess that's where I'm differing from some of the other presentations you've seen tonight, in the idea that we're relocalising not just our homes, but our whole communities, our economic production. We're not whizzing around the countryside on HS2 or indeed on our currently horribly overcrowded commuter trains. One of the things that I luckily only occasionally have to do is catch a commuter train out of London at sort of 5:30 in a weekday afternoon. And that is basically absolute hell. And I'm sure that's also true here in Leeds, that those afternoon commuter, you know, the roads are terrible, the trains are terrible, everyone's whizzing around, everyone's miserable, everyone spends hours a day doing that. And we really have to stop that and relocalise our lives. And I think there's already been a lot said, so I won't talk very much about the actual quality of housing. I'm a builder's daughter, so I can get a bit geeky about all of this, and I'm rather interested in it. But I will quote particularly the Malvern Hills Transition Towns Group. They got a thermal imaging camera, and they showed me some pictures from it, truly horrifying, of current mass builder built homes that were just literally as leaky as sieves, that were absolutely awful standards. The kind of things we're building now just aren't living up to the kind of standards. And, you know, we have such a huge problem with affordability. I think, you know, none of us as speakers, I think, are disagreeing with this. We can't continue as we are now with this green belt building by developers of terrible quality homes around the edges of towns where you have to have two full-time workers pretty well to support a mortgage, 2 cars. They spend hours commuting every day, and it's just a miserable life, and it's a struggle. And financially, as the prices keep going up, people keep going further and further under, further into debt, into, again, going back to my starting point, that unsustainable financial sector. And one of the other things that I think is worth pointing out that none of the speakers have entirely perhaps highlighted yet, although we've seen hints of it, is the fact that we need to make sure that everybody can have very close exposure to nature in very close to their home. And I was lucky enough to visit Lilac this afternoon, and you saw the pictures of very early lilac. And I can tell you now that sustainable drainage space in the middle is actually a riot of colour and flowers and is absolutely brilliant. And then you walk up through the allotments to the little pocket garden they've created. And what you've got there is a chance to experience all kind of different aspects of nature, feelings of nature. And you know, that can sound very soft and cuddly, but I'll tell you a recent study that I think is particularly interesting. There's a lot of studies coming out that are saying that people have better mental and physical health if they have close exposure to nature. The chance to be in contact, not necessarily with enormous big natural spaces, but just a little bit of nature. And that's a study came out a few months ago that said that women who find it difficult, have no access to natural spaces, have significantly lower birth weight babies than women who have close exposure to nature. So one of the things about where our grandchildren are going to live is it has to be that chance of being exposed to nature. And then finally, and I'm interested that, and this is where I can agree with Corin, just to make sure we balance this out. You know, my 50 words talked about democracy, and you know, it's very clear that we have an utterly broken democratic system at the moment. And it's also, we can thank the Scots for this, now to become very clear that there's real will, real passion, real desire for change that's going to force change to happen. And now I think, I'm going to controversially say that I think English votes for English laws, or indeed an English parliament just carved out of the existing Westminster space, is an absolute nonsense that doesn't solve anything at all, aside from all the technical problems. What we need to do is go back to local communities, local people, local councils, and say that's where the power starts, and that's where power should build up from, but the base, the real power lies there at the local area. And so if there's going to be an English Parliament, it should certainly not be anywhere near London. And you can start debating with the South West about that one. I think you might win, you've probably got the numbers. But, so our grandchildren, they're living a physically much more localised life. But of course we've got the kind of technology that Corin was referring to. They're in contact with the world. They might be speaking to people around the world every day, but they're not spending hours commuting back and forth, whizzing regularly around the country. They've got a lot of their food coming locally, a lot of their manufactures coming from locally. They've got small businesses, cooperatives, a different kind of economy, a largely, but not totally, deglobalised economy. And they've got something we might want to talk about. It gets a bit away from housing, but they've got shorter working hours, so they actually have more life to live in this community space, more life to contribute to this community space. So there's some thoughts. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.